My wife secretly her ex and forged my signature on a $250, $0 property transfer so she could claim the house in the divorce. Now she's suing me for half of the entire estate, including my 401k and our family business, and I just found out she's been planning this for months. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am, trying to make sense of a complete shitstorm that's turned my life upside down. The craziest part. It all started with a gut feeling, a little nagging suspicion that something was off. And then I stumbled onto the truth, something so shocking I still can't believe I didn't see it coming. My wife and I had been together for over 10 years. We married young, built a life, had a kid, and on paper everything looked good. We had a nice house, a growing business, decent savings, and a future that I thought was secure, but behind the scenes, that's where the nightmare was brewing. It started subtly. Had been acting weird, more irritable, distant, constantly on her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Little things, you know. She'd cancel plans at the last minute, make up excuses about work or her friends. I brushed it off at first, telling myself she was just stressed or tired. But then I noticed her phone was more secretive than ever. She'd lock it, hide texts, and delete messages when I walked into the room. One night I was working late at the office when I got a strange text from an unknown number. It was just a picture, something that looked like but not quite. She was in a hotel room, half-dressed, with a guy I didn't recognize. I froze. My stomach sank. I stared at that message for a long time, trying to process what I was seeing. I thought maybe it was a joke or a mistake. But the more I looked, the more I realized it was. I decided to dig deeper. I started checking her phone behind her back, something I hate doing, but I felt I had to. I found more messages, flirty, suggestive, sometimes downright explicit. It was clear she was having an affair. The guy was someone she'd met at a conference, I later found out. They'd been seeing each other for months. I felt like my world was crashing down around me. I trusted her, loved her, and now I found out she'd been lying to my face every single day. And then I found out about the bigger, more fucked up part. She wasn't just cheating on me, they'd been planning to run away together. I found emails and texts where she was organizing her move, talking about how she'd leave the house, take the kid, and start fresh with him. She even forged my signature on some legal documents so she could claim the house in the divorce. She'd been plotting this for months, quietly building her escape plan while pretending everything was fine. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Not only was she cheating, but she was also stealing from me, our house, our savings, even the business we built. She'd been lying about everything, and I was just now realizing how deep this betrayal went. I felt a rage I'd never experienced before. How could she do this? How could she lie so easily, manipulate me, and then turn around and try to take everything I worked for? I remember sitting alone in the living room, staring at the wall, trying to process what I'd just uncovered. My hands were trembling. I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was the fact that she'd been planning her escape while I was clueless, working my ass off to keep everything afloat. It was like she'd been playing me from the start and I was too blind to see it. That's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let her walk away with my life's work and the house we built. I needed a plan, but I wasn't sure what that was yet. All I knew was that my wife, my partner of so many years, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. And now I had to figure out how to fight back. The more I thought about it, the more furious I became. I had trusted implicitly. We had our problems like any couple, but I never imagined she'd go this far, secretly her ex. Forged my signature and was now trying to take everything from me. It was like waking up in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I knew I couldn't confront her without solid proof, so I started gathering evidence, screenshots, emails, everything I could find. I needed leverage, and I needed to understand exactly how deep her plans went. The next day, I decided to dig into the legal side of things. I pulled out all the documents related to the house, the business, and our savings. The house, I learned, was registered in both our names, but she had secretly transferred her share to her ex-husband, Mark, claiming it was part of a divorce settlement she'd never told me about. That's when I found out she'd been talking to him behind my back, planning to remarry him and completely cut me out of the picture. It was all so calculated. She'd forged my signature on a property transfer worth $250, $0, just so she could claim the house in the divorce. The fact that she'd been so brazen about it made me sick. I also found out she'd been draining our joint account, funneling money into an account under her maiden name. She'd even transferred money from our family business, my pride and joy, into her own account. She'd been planning this for months, probably longer. I couldn't believe I missed all the signs. She'd been acting cold, dismissive, and outright bitchy for a while now, but I never thought it was because she was cheating or planning to leave me with nothing. I thought maybe she was just stressed or unhappy. Turns out she was plotting her escape, and I was the fool who didn't see it. I needed to confront her. But I knew better than to do it blindly. I waited until that evening when she was home alone. I confronted her in the living room, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. I laid out all my findings, the texts, the forged signatures, the transfers. Her face twisted into a sneer and she started lying right away. "Oh, come on, Jason," she sneered, crossing her arms. "You're overreacting. Those texts are nothing. Mark and I are just friends. Besides, you're being paranoid. You're always so jealous and controlling. I don't know what you want from me." She tried to act innocent, but I could see through her lies. Her eyes were darting around and her voice cracked when everything. She kept insisting I was crazy, that I was imagining things, that I was just insecure. I didn't buy it. I knew her too well. I knew when she was lying. Her little smirk, the way she avoided eye contact, she was hiding something. I told her I had enough. That I knew she'd been cheating, stealing, and planning her escape for months. I told her I was done being played. I demanded she tell me the truth, but she just kept denying, throwing blame back at me. That moment was pure chaos. She screamed at me, called me paranoid, said I was ruining everything. She told me I was just insecure because I wasn't paying enough attention to her. It was classic gaslighting. She pretended to be the victim, acting like I was the crazy one. But I wasn't stupid. I knew the truth, and I knew she was lying through her teeth. The worst part was feeling completely powerless. I wanted to lash out, to yell, to do something, anything to stop her. But I knew I had to keep my cool. I pulled out my phone and started recording her, just in case I needed evidence later. She saw it and immediately got even more defensive, trying to grab the phone from me. It was a mess. I realized I was dealing with a master manipulator, someone who could lie and spin a story so convincingly that even I started questioning my own sanity. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head. The betrayal, the lies, the fact that she'd been planning her new life behind my back, all while pretending to be the loving wife. I felt numb, angry, and betrayed all at once. I started thinking about what to do next, how to protect myself, my assets, and my son. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little bit. She'd proven she was capable of anything to get what she wanted. By the time I woke up the next morning, I had a plan forming. I was going to lawyer up, get a hold of legal advice, and start protecting what was mine. I wasn't going to let her take everything without a fight. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of a long, ugly battle, and the worst part, I still loved her. I still wanted to believe there was some way to fix this. But how do you fix a marriage when one person has been planning your destruction all along? That's what I was about to find out. After that confrontation, everything changed. I felt like I'd been by a freight train. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd just uncovered, but at the same time, I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her keep playing her games or keep draining my bank accounts and stealing my property. I sat down at my computer and started making calls, reaching out to a lawyer I found through a trusted friend. The lawyer, Lisa, was sharp, no nonsense, and she immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Lisa told me I needed to get a restraining order on her and start gathering all the evidence I had: texts, emails, documents, anything that proved her plans. She also explained that because she'd forged my signature on the property transfer and was trying to claim my assets, I had strong grounds for a legal battle. The more I explained, the more I realized how deep her deception went. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. She'd even gone as far as secretly her ex, Mark, while pretending to be my loyal wife. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I'd always thought was a little bitchy sometimes, sure, but I never thought she'd be capable of such manipulation and betrayal. I was furious at her, at myself for not seeing it sooner, and at the whole situation. I decided I needed to get my ducks in a row before confronting her again. So I told Lisa I wanted to file for divorce and protect what was mine. Over the next few days, I worked closely with Lisa. She advised me to freeze all my accounts, change passwords, and make sure that any suspicious transfers or activity were reported. I also hired a private investigator to dig into recent financial moves, just to confirm she wasn't hiding anything else. Turns out she'd been funneling money into an account under her maiden name and had even set up a secret savings account in her ex-husband's name. She'd been planning her escape so meticulously that it was frightening. Meanwhile, was still acting like nothing was wrong. She'd come home, act sweet, and pretend everything was fine. But I could see through her act now. Her bitchy smile, the way she'd dismiss my concerns, and her constant denial, all of it was just a cover-up. I caught her in lies more than once, and I had the recordings to prove it. I started to realize that her whole personality had shifted into this manipulative, entitled woman who would do anything to get what she wanted. One night, she pushed me too far. I found her in the bedroom packing a small bag. She was trying to leave, I could tell. When I confronted her, she snapped and started yelling at me, calling me paranoid, controlling, and jealous. She said I was just insecure because I couldn't keep her happy. That's when I lost it. I told her I had enough of her bullshit, that I knew everything, and that I was going to take her to court. I told her I'd fight her for every penny and every asset she was trying to steal from me. She looked at me with this sneer, like she thought she had me cornered, but I wasn't backing down anymore. I was done being the victim. I was done being manipulated. I told her I'd be filing for divorce and she could forget about the house or the business. I was going to make sure she paid for every lie, every betrayal, every dollar she tried to steal. The next day, I sent her a formal letter through my lawyer, letting her know I was taking legal action, that I'd be filing for divorce, and that any further attempts to transfer or hide assets would be met with serious legal consequences. I knew I had to be careful, but I also knew I couldn't let her continue her schemes. I'd come too far and I had too much at stake. As I sat there looking at the letter, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had a plan, and dread because I knew this was going to get uglier before it got better. I was ready for the fight, but part of me still couldn't believe I was in this situation. I'd trusted for so long, believed she was my partner, my best friend. Now I saw her for what she really was. A manipulative, selfish woman who'd do anything for money and revenge. I knew I had to stay strong. I had no choice. If I didn't fight now, I'd lose everything. And I wasn't about to let that happen. The legal battle that followed was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Didn't take my threat lightly. She doubled down on her lies, trying to spin every accusation against me. She claimed I was abusive, controlling, that I'd been neglecting her and the kid. She even brought her own lawyer into the picture, a slick woman named Karen who seemed to have one goal: make me look like the bad guy. I knew I had to stay focused. Lisa, my lawyer, warned me that was trying to manipulate the court, that her recent actions, transferring assets, forging signatures, planning her remarriage, were all evidence pointing to her deceit. I had to prove her intent, her malicious intent to take everything I'd worked for. The first hearing was a whirlwind. Showed up looking cold and bitchy with her lawyer by her side. She tried to make it seem like I was the one causing trouble, that I was paranoid and overreacting. But I had everything documented. The forged signatures, the secret accounts, the emails, every piece of evidence Lisa had helped me gather. When I presented it all, the judge's eyes widened. His face turned pale when I detailed how she'd secretly marked and transferred the house into his name. The court was starting to see through her lies. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I was an overbearing husband who didn't appreciate her. She threw in some classic lies, how I'd been controlling her, refusing her sex, making her feel trapped. But I knew better. I knew she'd been planning this for months, using me as a fool. I felt a mixture of anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of relief that the truth was finally coming out. Throughout the hearings, I stayed firm. I pushed for a temporary restraining order to prevent her from selling or transferring any more assets. I also demanded an accounting of all our joint property, savings, and business shares. The lawyer tried to object, but the judge saw through her game. The court granted the restraining order, at least temporarily freezing her ability to move assets. Meanwhile, I kept digging into her financial transactions. I hired a forensic accountant, someone who could trace every dollar she'd moved. It didn't take long to find more irregularities. Large sums transferred to offshore accounts, payments to her new husband's account, and even some suspicious withdrawals from the business account. It was clear she'd been planning her escape for a long time, and she'd used my trust to do it. I also started to prepare for the worst, because I knew wasn't going down without a fight. She began to spin stories to mutual friends, claiming I was abusive and manipulative, trying to turn everyone against me. It hurt more than I expected. People I thought knew us well started questioning me, and I felt isolated. But I had my evidence and I knew the truth. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, and now I was faced with this cold, calculating woman who'd been lying to my face for months. I couldn't sleep some nights. My mind kept replaying the moments when I'd trusted her, when I'd thought she loved me. It was hard to accept that she'd been planning this all along. Despite everything, I refused to give up. I was determined to protect what was mine, my house, my family, my business. I knew she would continue to manipulate and scheme, but I also knew I had the truth on my side. I started to focus on building my case, gathering more evidence, and preparing for the final court date. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I couldn't let her win. Not after everything I'd been through. Some days I'd catch myself questioning whether I was doing the right thing, whether I should just walk away and cut my losses. But then I remembered the years we'd spent together, the promises, the dreams we'd shared. And I realized I owed it to myself and my son to fight for what was rightfully ours. I wasn't going down without a fight. This was war, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The court date finally arrived after weeks of tense preparation. I remember sitting there, feeling like I was on trial myself, with my heart pounding in my chest. Looked smug, confident that her lies and schemes would carry her through. Her lawyer, Corinne, looked equally confident, but I knew better. I had the evidence. And I had Lisa, my lawyer, sitting beside me, ready to fight tooth and nail. When the judge called the hearing to order, his lawyer tried to spin everything, claiming I was abusive, controlling, and that had been secretly trying to protect herself from me. She painted me as some sort of monster, twisting facts and ignoring the mountain of evidence I had. I could see smirking, thinking she had already won. But then Lisa stepped up, calm and assertive, laying out the facts in clear detail. She presented the forged signatures, the emails, the transfers, everything that proved malicious intent. She explained how I'd been planning her escape for months, secretly marked, and tried to claim the house by forging my signature. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, reviewing documents, and finally she looked directly at her lawyer. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said, "It's clear that the defendant engaged in fraudulent activities to transfer property and hide assets. This court will issue an order to reverse the transfers of the house and is prohibited from transferring or selling any further assets without court approval." That was a huge win for me. I felt a rush of relief, finally some justice, but I knew this wasn't over. Furious and humiliated, tried to argue, but the judge cut her off, emphasizing that her actions had serious legal consequences. In the days that followed, I worked with Lisa to finalize the divorce settlement. I insisted on keeping the business and my 401k, the things I'd worked so hard for. Attempts to claim half of everything, including the business, were ultimately dismissed because of her deceit. But the damage was done. The house was returned to our joint ownership, and I was awarded full custody of my son. The aftermath was a moved out, angry and bitter, vowing revenge. She tried to smear my name among friends and family, claiming I was the bad guy. But I had the evidence and I knew the truth. I kept my head down, focused on rebuilding my life and making sure my son was protected from her chaos. I also started to piece myself back together. The betrayal cut deep. Trust is hard to rebuild once it's broken, and I felt a lot of anger, sadness, and confusion. But I also learned some hard lessons. Never ignore the little signs. People are capable of hiding their true selves, sometimes for years. And when it comes to money, it pays to be vigilant. No matter how much you trust someone, you have to protect yourself. Now, I'm slowly moving on. I've cut ties with completely, focusing on my son and my business. I realize I'll probably never fully get over the betrayal, but I refuse to let it define me. I want to rebuild a life based on honesty and integrity, something I can be proud of again. If I could give any advice, it's this: trust your instincts, protect your assets, and never let anyone manipulate you into thinking you're crazy for questioning their motives. Because sometimes the truth is uglier than you ever imagined, and you have to be ready to fight for it. Looking back now, I realize how close I was to losing everything: my house, my business, my savings, and most painfully, my sense of stability. This betrayal cut deeper than I ever thought possible, and the trust I once had in her is shattered beyond repair. But amidst the chaos, I learned a lot about myself, about resilience, about the importance of standing up for what's right, and about the dangerous game that trust can sometimes be. The entire experience has left a scar, but it's also made me stronger. I've become more cautious, more aware of the signs that people can hide their true intentions behind a pretty face or a sweet smile. I no longer take anything for granted, especially not the people closest to me. And I've come to understand that money, power, and control can make people do terrible things if they're desperate enough. Most importantly, I've learned that revenge isn't always about payback in the traditional sense. It's about protecting yourself, your assets, your dignity, and your future. I fought hard to keep what was mine, and I did it not because I wanted to hurt, but because I refused to let her destroy me completely. I wanted to send a message that betrayal has consequences, and that honesty, even when it's hard, is always the better path. Now, I focus on rebuilding my life, one day at a time. My son is my anchor, my reason to keep going. I've started therapy to deal with the emotional aftermath, and I've thrown myself back into my work. The business is stabilizing, and I'm slowly learning to trust again, though it's never quite the same. I still have nightmares sometimes about the lies, the deception, and the feeling of betrayal. But I also have hope. Hope that this nightmare is finally behind me. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: never ignore the signs. Be vigilant. Protect what's yours. And don't let anyone manipulate you into thinking you're crazy for questioning their motives. Because in the end, the truth will come out, sometimes in ways you never expected. And when it does, you'll realize that fighting for yourself is the only way to truly move on. I don't regret standing up for myself, even if it's been the hardest thing I've ever done. Because at the end of the day, I know I fought for my life, my dignity, and my future. And I did it for my son, who's the only reason I keep going every day. No matter how deep the betrayal, how ugly the battle, you have to remember, your worth isn't defined by the people who hurt you. It's defined by how you pick yourself up afterward. And I'm proud to say I've done just that.